Hi, it's Jonathan from Behind the Build, and I wanted to make you aware of a change. What you'll see in the title of the releases is Behind the Build AD and Behind the Build ID. Behind the Build AD is architectural design. Anything associated with architectural design will be released on Mondays. Behind the Build ID is interior design. Anything to do with interior design and its consultants will be released on Thursdays. I would ask kindly that as you hear this, if you could, to find the rating system in the format that you listen and consume Behind the Build, and please give it 5 stars. It helps us with overall engagement and visibility with a new audience. With that said, please enjoy today's episode. Welcome to Behind the Build. I am your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I've got with me someone who is not in architecture. He's not an interior designer. He is not an engineer. He is not a consultant. So those are the things that he is not. But what he is actually quite impressive. His name is Bradford, and he is a city councillor for Toronto and also a planner by trade. So Brad, thanks for joining today.
Great to be with you, Jonathan, and back in your office here. And it's a pretty sweet little space. So this is really cool.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you making time in the schedule to do this. I've been looking forward to doing this with you, having got to know you a little bit marginally over the last little while. I thought it would be really interesting for people that listen to this to get to know a city councillor, someone that's really familiar with what planning is, given what this podcast is, and to gain that perspective of kind of who you are and what you are and how you've kind of made your way through your professional career. So before getting into the depths of the conversation with Brad, I thought it'd be important to suggest that, I bring people through my home and everybody gets to experience most people get to experience in some capacity what it is to sit down and have lunch with me, get to know each other a little bit. And in the process of doing this, we generally will sit at my dining room table, and right above them are these 2 transom windows. They bring in a lot of natural light coming in from the west. And at the back of the house, we've got this really large, it's a 16-foot by 8-foot slider. So 1 fixed panel, 1 mobile panel, and it allows for an abundance of natural light to fill the area. So as Brad comes over, he gets to see, having been in the area, the beaches area, for quite some time and representing that area. He knows what these homes look like. He got to come see what it looks like when you upgrade the house, when you put the addition on, and what the house looks like when it's flooded with natural light. So we move from inside, sitting at the dining room table for a couple minutes, and we come outside and we sit down in my office. And what you don't know is that Brad also really likes guitar. So we were able to play a little bit of guitar here in the office. And again, lots of natural light coming in through these windows and door systems that I got through the doors. They're our go-to window and door supplier. And again, the benefit to all of this is just the concept of natural light, not having to turn on a light because you're flooded with these beautiful, low-profile, aluminum-clad doors and windows. And they're amazing. They're easy to open. They're easy to maneuver. The door system to my office is a tilt and turn, so it kind of tilts out. So on summer days, I can open it up and get some fresh air coming in. Even when I'm having interviews and sitting down with people, every now and again we open it up just to get some nice fresh air into the office. If you're interested in learning more about it, feel free to email me, because the doors are amazing. They've got fantastic products. They come from Europe, they make them here, and they do everything from all of the shop drawings through to service and installation in the middle. My email address is Jonathan, Jonathan, @waldenhomes.ca. And now, let's go back to Brad. I would start off by asking you, one, where did you grow up? And 2, what kind of kid were you? What are some of your earliest memories of intrigue into what a city looks like?
I grew up in Hamilton in the suburbs, had a single mom kind of on her own from the time I was 6. She raised 3 of us on her own. So it was pretty chaotic growing up. There were a lot of challenges with that, like there are for a lot of families.
Yep.
Didn't have a lot, but we had each other. And, at the same time, you didn't want for a lot. I just now, being the father of 2 young kids of my own, I sort of reflect back about what she was able to do and how hard that would have been, now knowing what it's like on the other side.
Yeah, like there's 2 of you.
Exactly. Yeah. And my partner's incredible. And there's 2 of us and 2 kids, and she was on her own with 3. So, it was interesting. And I was an active kid. I grew up, I always wanted to play hockey growing up.
Yep.
But my mom was like, man, there's all that equipment with hockey. That's going to be expensive. We didn't have a lot of money. So she put me in figure skating, which actually turned out to be pretty expensive. We didn't know at the time.
I also did figure skating.
Oh, no kidding.
I've never spoken about that with anyone.
Yeah. So I was at the Dave Andreychuk Arena in Hamilton on Upper James. Spent a lot of time there.
Okay. Did
that for a long one
of the best tricks you learned how to do that you could actually nail? Was there anything?
Oh yeah. I was doing triples. Like I was, the way I describe it for folks, and I give sort of a hockey analogy, it's like I made it to the top level.
Okay.
I grew up training with and competing against all the folks that, you've heard about if you watch the Olympics or anything.
Yeah.
Scott and Tessa, Patrick Chan, knew those folks as competitors, but they were always much better. So the hockey analogy would be I kind of made it to the level of like OHL, 4th line.
Okay.
That's kind of where I ended up. But we moved to sort of Hespeler, which is part of Cambridge, Ontario at some point. I finished up high school there. The other sport I played was rugby. So sort of opposite end of the spectrum there. And that was just a product of like skating. Busy season was sort of summer, fall, winter, and spring was a little bit more of a downtime. Rugby happened to be in the spring. So did a lot of rugby, ended up playing that in university. But like
you play, are you playing intramurals or did you play?
No, I played at the University of Guelph.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I played club in the county, and I really enjoyed that. I like team sports.
Yep.
I like the camaraderie. I like the collective resilience. I love that team mentality. So anyways, I did all that stuff, and I was not a particularly strong student in high school, never applied myself. I wasn't super focused on the books, barely got into university. And then when I got there, I remember this feeling of almost imposter syndrome and being nervous that I was going to like flunk out.
Yes, I felt the same way. I appreciate that.
Yeah. But then I applied myself for the first time really, and ended up connecting the dots. And I still remember, because I'm old, I'm sure it's not this way anymore, but the marks would go up and they would post them outside the lecture room, and you would look at your student card and it had like 20 digits, and then you'd look at the mark. And I didn't have any self-confidence. I didn't believe in myself. So I would see the marks, and the marks were good. And I would just be going back and forth between my card with that 20-digit number and then the mark. I'm like, am I missing a number? That's not like, this makes sense. This is a mistake. And I kind of bounced around because I was at Laurentian. That was, one of only 2 schools I got into. And I was up in Sudbury, which, by the way, I loved. Like, Shield country is spectacular.
Yeah.
And so I was doing really well there. That allowed me to transfer to the University of Guelph to play rugby there. But then again, I had this like, I was at, what wasn't as difficult to school to get into when I was at Laurentian.
Yeah.
Now I'm at Guelph. It's going to be harder. Continued to do well though. And did well all the way through.
I'm curious because having grown up with, I guess, what would have been a pretty tight family with just the 4 of you kind of like doing it on your own. And then leaving and going to Laurentian, what was that like? That independence?
I actually had a lot of independence, which might have been part of the problem.
Okay.
Because like I took the babysitter course when I was 11 or 12 or whatever, and then I was kind of taking care of my younger brother and sister from an early age because my mom had to work.
Yeah,
she was working multiple jobs. There was nobody around.
Also worth noting is you didn't have cell phones.
Yeah, that's right.
Way. So if something was going wrong, like you're going to a neighbor's house.
And it's like, it's funny. You had to hide a key outside.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like a digital lock or whatever. Yeah. And You didn't even really, I don't know. It seems like you didn't even think about that stuff though.
You didn't, because it's all you knew.
Yeah. We're out riding bikes around the neighborhood. You weren't worried about safety the same way you might be now. It was sort of like come home when the street lights come on, that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Road hockey, riding bikes to the variety store, getting some sour keys, fun dips, stuff like that. But yeah, I probably could have benefited from some more supervision. And I was of that cohort, especially when I got to Cambridge. It's like turn 16, get your G1 the next day.
Yeah.
Like, get the G1.
Give me that independence.
Yeah. And especially with my skating, like there was a point I was training twice a day. So I think my mom was also keen to have me be able to get myself to the rink in the morning for a 6 a.m. practice and not her have to do that. So yeah, I probably, there's probably a balance where I could have had some more supervision. And, but again, like I just look back now at what my mom was able to do and raise 3 of us and give us every opportunity and do it on her own. And it kind of blows my mind. I still actually don't really know how that happened, but I'm grateful for everything she did for us.
Yeah. And in terms of like school, what were those, what you did enjoy in school? Might not have been the best marks, but like, what did you enjoy? Like, what were some of the subjects that you really took to?
You know, it's interesting. If I reflect on like high school, it was kind of like just getting through. You always figured you were going to go and do something afterwards, but then you're looking at the marks and they're not there. And I remember a time when I was just getting all these rejection letters from, like University of Toronto or Western and whatever. And I just sort of assumed I'd go to school. And then I had this sort of moment where I was like, fuck,
I'm not going to make it.
Maybe I'm not actually going to go anywhere. And then I was thinking about joining the military. Like that's probably what I would have done. It's all the idea of service has always appealed to me. And that would have been a pathway. It would have been a different pathway. But, always grateful for, Laurentian and kind of getting me going and showing me that I could be better and giving me an opportunity to demonstrate that. So it was good.
Okay. And I assume also through that period of time and saying when you turn 16, you're also helping out, I guess, picking up your siblings, taking them to and from every now and again.
Yeah. Yeah. There was some of that. Trying to help out. I don't know if my mom would say I was a help or a hindrance. Like it's probably up for debate.
I need the car.
You know what? And I don't know if my siblings would say I was a help or a hindrance, but we all got by. Yeah. And that's, I think family leans on each other and moments of adversity. Like that's, you got to kind of come together to get through. And it's interesting. Like my mom actually just received a cancer diagnosis this week and it's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. But hearing her talk about that, it made me think about all the challenges growing up because she's like, oh, it's just another bump in the road.
Yeah.
And that's like her mentality. And it's like really speaks to who she is. It's inspiring. It's also just makes me emotional because I'm like, man, how can somebody be so strong?
Right.
And it like lots of people go through cancer. Yep. I think it's really tough.
Yep.
Lots of people get through it. And we've got great hospitals here in Ontario, but it's just another thing. Like, someone who's had a challenging life and been able to do some pretty remarkable things. And her attitude is like, we're going to get through it, get the surgery in, get the treatment, just got to go through the treatment.
Yep.
Like,
well, okay, for what it's worth, I'll tell you, I just found out like this week that someone else I know just was in full remission. So,
good. Yeah. That's good news. Yeah. Ring the bell.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So that was kind of growing up and then, as I went through my undergrad, I was doing environmental studies. That's what I sort of finished with. I did an internship at the Canadian Urban Institute.
Okay.
And at this point, I was at York University. The short of that is I tore my second ACL playing rugby at Guelph. And so then it was like, all right, I'm going to go to Toronto, go to school there. And York University has a history of going on strike. I think they have more strikes than like anywhere else. Kind of an activist university, which I totally didn't know because part of the story is I was completely naive to politics and any of that stuff for the majority of my life. But I had this internship that I landed and then, what was going to be a 1 day a week thing turned to like going 3 or 4 days a week. And I got really into it. And, I played Sim City growing up. I always liked cities. And then I was working at Canadian Urban Institute. And then I was like, okay, like maybe there's a pathway to actually do more school. So the guy who barely got into school, then did really well in undergrad, was able to get a scholarship and go to the University of Waterloo for urban planning for grad school. That was kind of the path.
So I just want to say, so that anyone that is unfamiliar, if you're listening to this, and I mean, whether you do or you do not know, SimCity, at the time that you're describing it, was like it was new.
Right. Does it still exist now?
I think it does. I don't know. I'm not a gamer anymore. I sadly wish I, in some ways, could have like rekindled that love of gaming, but that was a short period of time. It was a great game because like you got to understand how to kind of build a city.
Like literally the building blocks of sort of greenfield building a city. And if you were going to, hold the pen and do it however you wanted to do it, you could do it in that game. What I find so interesting about that too is that in all of the people that I've spoken to, no one's ever referenced SimCity. Yeah, it's I don't know. Like it must have had an audience. Like they 100%, kept coming out. Like game. Yeah, exactly. So fellow SimCity folks, they're out there.
Yeah, they're out there.
Got to go find them.
They're hiding in the shadows. Yeah. Don't want to know their plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Waterloo for planning, and what was that like? Because I know that the programs there are pretty intense.
Yeah, Waterloo's a top shelf school for planning and for a lot of other things. Grad school was just a different vibe. Part of my undergrad, it was with the rugby team, and you can kind of imagine what that's like. Was great, but grad school was very different. Everyone was very focused.
Right.
I introduced a bunch of my colleagues to like flip cup and beer pong that had literally never done it before, and that kind of actually blew my mind. But it was fun, so we learned that together.
Have you not lived?
Yeah, well, I was just sort of like, wait, you did an undergrad? No, so it was great, and the dynamic with my profs, I had some really great professors, and some of whom I'm still in touch with, especially urban planning matters. But when you go to grad school, you're almost more colleagues. So like you go to the grad pub after class and have a beer with your prof, which was a little different than being one of like 300 people in a poli-sci class or something. There's a different dynamic. You've got an advisor, you're working together on research.
How many students were in the program at the time?
Like 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a small group. Yeah.
Small crew. So you get to know everybody really well.
And is it a supportive group or is it a competitive group?
No, it was pretty supportive. We played like softball together, intramural grad stuff, dodgeball, like would go to the grad pub together. I ended up actually getting involved in, at the time, what was called the Canadian Association of Planning Students. So I guess I sort of like ran for that and was elected as the president. And we put a big conference on in Waterloo, and that was it. It was actually important in the trajectory of everything because one of our keynote speakers at that conference, and it was a national conference, we had like 500 students from across the country come to Waterloo, and we hosted this big thing.
How are students traveling to Waterloo?
You could get grants and stuff from your student associations or whatever. And the conference was super cheap. It's not like going to a conference as a professional here. I think it was like $100 to go or something. Right. And then people carpool and crash, people crash in it.
Sleep on the floor.
Yeah, exactly. It was a different vibe, right? And actually a very simple vibe, which is kind of nice in retrospect.
Yeah, and also opportunity to learn how to play flip cup and things.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, this was business, but one of our keynote speakers was a guy named Craig Applegath, who's a prominent architect here in Toronto at a firm called Dialogue, and has been a mentor to me ever since. This is like, I think 2010 and maybe 2011. And he was one of our speakers because he was talking about resilience, community resilience, ecological resilience, which was the theme at the time. And he was one of the experts in Canada. And we had connected after the conference, stayed in touch. And, long story short, I ended up connecting with his firm and going and working there in consulting at Dialogue here in Toronto before I even graduated. Actually,
I was going to say this was before.
Before I even finished my degree, and then that was like a separate issue of being a consultant, working in the studio till like 1 a.m, and then also trying to finish your thesis. But eventually, it did get done. More tuition and dollars were spent, and more time went on, but eventually we got it done.
Yeah, but also you're getting an experience at like arguably one of the better practices in the city.
It was great because I was younger and hungry and keen and just wanting to learn. And what's cool about working at a firm like Dialogue, it's interdisciplinary. So you're seeing other disciplines, architecture, engineering, civil, interior design, and how that interfaces with the work that we're doing on the front end, which is the urban planning stuff, and working on interesting projects across the country. So different than if you're like a planner at the City of Toronto and, you're kind of rinse and repeat doing the same sort of thing over and over again, or, maybe you're a stick build urban planner, doing subdivisions out in Binbrook or something.
Right.
This was, I was working on an LRT in Edmonton. I was working on the University of Calgary's West Campus Master Plan, the Mosaic Stadium in Regina, Saskatchewan, Seneca College here in Toronto. So you got to see a lot of different stuff.
Yeah.
And I also got to learn from really talented people who have been doing it a lot longer than me. And
were you able to travel to these places as well?
Yeah, sometimes.
They were under construction?
Yeah, sometimes. On the urban planning stuff, we're more doing stakeholder and consulting work with the community to inform the plans that we're going to present and either get adopted by the university or the council or whatever. And because I was a junior planner, my billable rate was cheap. So I was I was grinding out the work. So, you tend to send out the principals, put them in front of the clients because that's what the clients want.
Yeah.
But the people who are doing a lot of the work on these projects are the juniors, kind of under the supervision of a, senior planner or something. So I got some good reps. It was good.
In the process of doing that, you're working alongside the other teams, right? Or not?
Yeah. You know what? The way it goes more is you get a client, maybe it's a hospital, maybe it's a university, and the planning team goes in and does the plan and lays out the blocking and framework and sort of mobility network and all that stuff. And then eventually the university or the hospital goes to tender the architecture, and the firm that had done the planning is well positioned to go and compete for the architecture. And then you get the architecture, you package that in with the construction, the engineering, and all that sort of stuff. So it's almost like planning is often a loss leader, I think, in these big multidisciplinary studios and firms, because it's like, go get the planning work, and then we've got a, I don't know what the odds are, 60% chance of getting the stuff that actually pays the bills to keep the lights on.
Right.
Because planning, you don't make any money on planning.
Well, what I also know is that in majority of cases, even the large scale wins on those architectural projects are not even really all of the money that you can make.
Yeah, you want percentage billable of construction costs.
Yeah,
that's what you want.
Yeah. Contract administration, all that stuff, right? And even then, in large scale stuff, most of the companies that win it have to be very competitive on the pricing. So in many ways, you need variety of projects to be able.
I'm not an expert on this, and I've been out of this for 10 years or something. But I think you either want to be pretty big, or you want to be small and lean.
Yes.
I don't think you want to be medium. Medium, I think, is a tough space to exist.
Yeah, you gotta know exactly where you want to be and how you're going to fulfill that size.
Yeah,
with what's out there. So, what did it look like for you having worked there? What was it for you that made you say, and I'm saying this because I know this, what led you away from it?
Opportunity to do something different. When I was in grad school, my research was on, how do I say this in a non-academic way? It was basically looking at how land use planning shapes the energy demand of a community. So what are the land use decisions and frankly the zoning that will dictate the type of energy demand for a neighborhood, whether that's resi or commercial or industrial? How do those things fit together? And then what type of opportunities exist to have an energy efficient solution? And so really what I was focusing on was thermal. Really what I was focusing on was district energy. Okay. So the idea that you stack the different combinations of, residential where energy consumption is highest in the morning and at night when people come home from work.
Yep.
You have that buttress with some commercial applications where energy use is higher during the day. And you can create a nice smooth energy demand profile so you can run a really efficient system rather than peaking up and peaking down all the time. And with district energy, there's opportunities to deploy different technologies and different fuels because you've got your central plant and not like you're switching back and forth overnight, but you have the infrastructure, you have a thermal grid in place, you've got the buildings connected to that. So as different technologies come online, you can build off of that existing thermal grid. So that is what I was researching. And part of that was I went down to Boston, Massachusetts, and met the then president of the International District Energy Association, which is sort of a policy industry association.
Mhm.
And they ended up consolidating with the Canadian version of that while I was at Dialogue, since I had left grad school.
Yeah.
They called me up and said, hey, like, we got to stand up a Canadian desk, somebody to manage the sort of Canadian policy side now, work with the provinces, which generally are responsible for energy policy. And would you like to chat about that? And I was thinking, you know, again, kid from Hamilton, always had this idea that to work in the States, you had to prove that 300 million Americans were not able to do that job. That was just my naivety and not knowing what I was talking about. But you started looking into it. And at the time, there was something called the TN visa, temporary NAFTA. I don't know if that still exists, but there was a list of like 20 professions that could go down,
Mhm.
and urban planner was one of them. And it was literally like $52, and you just
Crazy.
applied as you crossed the border, and you got a
That's
3-year
crazy.
visa. And so,
$52.
yeah. And like on the spot.
Yeah.
And I just had a letter. I had all this stuff. I had my degrees, I had my thesis, I had project work
Hey,
from Dialogue to
you-
demonstrate I was an urban planner.
You're ready to prove your worth.
Yeah, the guy didn't care anything. It's just like, okay, here's a letter of employment, stamp, good for 3 years.
Here's a roll of pennies.
Yeah. And I drove down in my Honda Fit and got to the border, and that was it. And just straight out I-90 East, and moved down to Boston. So I just thought it was a cool opportunity, because you hear about all these big cities, and I hadn't traveled a lot at that point. And Boston, I thought was, you know, one of the greats and one of the big cities.
What year was this?
Probably like 2012. I think I was there 2012 to 2015.
I mean, we've talked sports before this, and for anyone that's not really interested in sports, I mean, maybe you want to turn down your volume for a second, but if not, like, this is at the same time like the Boston Celtics were.
Yeah, Celtics had won a championship.
Yeah.
The Bruins just won the cup, I think, the year before, maybe 2011.
And you had the Patriots.
The Patriots won, I think, a couple titles while I was down there.
So there's like
and the Red Sox, that was the big one.
Yeah.
The Red Sox, I think it was the first one they won was 2009, since like the curse, or maybe 2004, Curse of Bambino.
Yeah.
But then they won it again while I was down there in 2012 or 13 or so.
So like, you know,
it was, and Boston is like, sports are everything. I used to listen to sports talk radio down there. It was so good. Much, different than the sports radio talk up here. And it felt like at that time they were having a parade every year for somebody.
They were. And what I thought, I mean, one of the reasons I bring this up is because if you're in a major city in North America and you happen to have the opportunity to be in a city that places well, there's a big buzz around that city. You have the tourism, you have like all that other stuff. But with Boston, you also have the opportunity to be able to go to Fenway, and Fenway is like right not far from downtown.
I mean, it's a downtown neighborhood. It'd be like almost the equivalent of being in Leaside. It's like that.
It's in Toronto. I say this because I've actually just said this recently in another discussion, is that Toronto has that in a way that very few North American cities do, where you have all of your core sports teams playing in the heart of downtown. Yeah. I know that I digress. Let's go back to what you were talking about before.
Well, yeah, no, it's like you grow up and you think about these cities that they're not accessible to you, but Boston, ironically, is a very compact city.
Yes.
One of the oldest in North America. You can walk across downtown in 25 minutes. And so always thought like, oh, like these big US cities. And then you get down there, it's like, oh, Toronto is way bigger than Boston.
Oh yeah.
Way bigger.
Yeah.
But the other funny observation was I was so obsessed with being on the subway line. And I get down there, I'm talking to a real estate agent about it and finding an apartment. I'm like, yeah, I got to be on transit. And he sort of looks at me as like,
why?
Like everyone's on transit. Like we have transit everywhere.
Okay.
And it's like spaghetti on a map, right? Thrown against the wall. Like there's lines everywhere. And that was kind of a moment I realized, oh yeah, like Toronto's really just north, south, east, west, line 1 and line 2.
Yeah.
So you're so hyper focused on being on transit in Toronto, but that's not, you go to a city like Boston or New York or others. That's not really a thing like the way it is here. So I love my time down there. And
So how long were you down there?
3 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And I got to sort of travel across the US. We had clients in a lot of different states. So I'd go and do work with them. Went over to Dubai because we had some clients, members really in the Middle East, because they do district cooling and they do it at a size and scale that just dwarfs North America. And it's, interesting there because the driver, it's not so much about the environment. It's about being efficient, which is, of course, good for the environment, but it's about water efficiency because it takes 4 barrels of water to unlock 1 barrel of oil. So they are very conscientious about water conservation in so much as that helps unlock the oil. But either way, it's positive that we're being efficient.
Yes.
But the district cooling plants over there, one plant, they'll do more in one plant extension there than the entire North American market will do in a year here. So the scale is just crazy.
Right.
And then eventually I came back to Toronto.
Well, so wait, before we come back to Toronto, I want to ask you, what was one of the best meals that you had in Boston, if you can think back for just a moment? I know. Or I don't know, do you like pizza? What was one of the best places you went to? What was one of the best seafood places?
So this is where I got the introduction to IPAs.
Okay.
And their New England brewing is really good.
Yeah.
And again, go back to 2012 or whatever. I think they were a few years ahead of us on the IPA obsession, which came here much later. Almost to the point I was kind of done with it when I came back here. But there's Harpoon Brewery, was really great. It's in this neighborhood called Seaport. I was down there recently actually for a wedding, and it's changed so much. It's crazy. But when I was there, it was like this brewery kind of at the end of a road, right in the harbor, and it's active harbor with ports, and you've got fishermen coming up with, crabs and lobsters and stuff that they're taking right out into the restaurants. It's really cool. It's a working port. And Harpoon Brewery's at the end of it, and you can go in and get these great pretzels and cheese sauce. And
so you're having your lobster, and
it's good. And down the street, it's a bit of a New England chain, so maybe my friends in Boston will throw a little shade for calling out a chain restaurant.
Whatever.
Legal Seafood. I just always found it's called Legal Seafoods.
Okay.
There's maybe 4 or 5 locations, but the one in Seaport, right on the water, you've got a view of the harbor. The fish is coming right out of the water onto the plate. It's good. It's good value.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I liked there. There were neighborhood haunts that I would go to. I can't really remember the names of some of these places.
Whatever.
I lived in Cambridge for a year, which is different than the neighborhood I actually stayed most of the time in, which was Jamaica Plain.
Okay. Okay. So we'll leave that. So let's talk about because I want to get to it before we get to the end. I'm cognizant of time. So you come back to Toronto.
Yeah.
Okay. You're now a city councilor, but what led to that?
So what led to that was me coming back to Toronto, and I came back to Toronto as a bureaucrat.
Okay.
So my former boss, when I was at Dialogue, one of them, when you're a junior planner, you got a lot of bosses. But one of them was Jennifer Keesmaat.
Okay.
And so she was at a conference down in Boston, and I used to work for her. And we had a breakfast, and she said, would you be interested in coming back to Toronto and working in my office? Because she had since left Dialogue and became the chief planner.
Yeah.
I said, oh, that's very interesting. That would be cool. My visa was, on the way out, and I could probably get it renewed. But it was that moment in your life, am I going to stay in the US? Which was awesome. Or am I go back home, go back to Toronto? And this opportunity and door opened, which I'm really grateful for. And I decided, okay, I'll come back, and worked in her office. And what was, I guess, interesting and important about this was my first time working with municipal government as part of municipal government. This was my first time seeing the bureaucracy and the machinery of government working and more and more not working.
I was going to say, was it working?
No, no, it wasn't. And so
we're just talking about watch parts before this.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Inside of a bag.
There was a lot of friction. There was a lot of friction. Wasn't smooth. And it was also my first exposure to local politics or politics at all.
Yeah.
Again, you go back to, my mom raising 3 kids on her own. We didn't have time for politics. There'd be dinner table conversations about politics, but we didn't have a sign on the lawn We weren't volunteering. We didn't have money to donate. We were not plugged in on that stuff.
Yeah.
So similarly, I get to the city of Toronto, you start watching the show and council and this cast of characters down there making what are pretty consequential decisions for our day-to-day lives. And I saw that. And, between that and 3 years of work in the bureaucracy and banging my head against the wall, I decided, what, if I want to fix this, if I want to make it better, come off the sidelines, get into the arena, put your hand up and run for council.
Okay.
So that's what it looked like. It was not one moment. It was a culmination of sort of 3 years being in that place in that capacity and just feeling like, as a Torontonian who wanted the city to be better, there were lots of things that we could improve, but I needed to be in a decision-making position. And ultimately it's council that makes the decisions.
Throughout the conversation, really early on, you hear Brad talk about the importance and the impact that he had to have on his family, both in good and bad ways. And then you move into later life, and he's now running for mayor of Toronto. And the campaign to do so requires a lot of time away from family. So then you can imagine how important it is to be able to come home and be in the kitchen and sit around and cook a meal with family and engage in conversations and spend time with his kids. It's important. It's such a huge part of who you are. And one of the reasons why we really love working with Kaplan's Appliances is because it's a family-based business. And I know that it might sound a little hokey in saying it, but it matters. It's not some large conglomerate that owns the business. It's a generational business where the connection to the customer matters most. They focus all of their attention on the customer experience and customer service. If you haven't experienced it, I highly recommend you do. They put the same level of care into what they do as to what Brad wants to do for the city of Toronto. If you're interested in learning more about Kaplan's, email me. It's Jonathan, Jonathan, @waldenhomes.ca, and I'm happy to connect you with a rep. But for now, let's go back to Brad and hear a little bit more about him and his story and his professional growth. So how are you able to take what you know from planning and insert that into what you want to be able to try to start rectifying in those terms?
Well, it's interesting. Like, you run for council, and I ran in 2018.
Yeah.
And housing was starting to become an issue, but not like it is today. I wouldn't say we had the consensus around what I would say is a housing supply challenge and affordability crisis. That was not where we were, but all of the precursors for those challenges were present. But at the time I was running against, a former NDP member of parliament who had all the name rec, had all the resources, the fundraising lists, all that stuff. And I was, again, millennial guy talking about the need for more housing, urban planner talking about the need for more housing, more density. And that was pretty counterintuitive to politics at the time. Because politics at the time, you'd have guys here in Midtown that would stand up and, stigmatize an 18-story building on transit, knock it down to 12 stories and declare victory, right? And now we would say, look at all those units of housing, look at all of those homes that we lost, and look at how we're not getting maximum leverage on the $1 billion of infrastructure that's in the ground. Like, that's actually not a positive thing now. But back then, politics of the day would say, density was a negative thing.
Right.
And so my NDP opponent, despite, what you would characterize as, quote, progressives, they were not progressive when it came to housing.
Right.
And so I would be talking about mid-rise on Danforth, which of course, right? Like, of course. And, the position from some of those folks was very much status quo, 2 stories on Danforth, retail and an apartment above, sitting on top of $1 billion subway line.
Yeah.
Crazy, right? But that was 2018.
Yep.
So I talked about it, and, I call Beaches East York, which is home for me. I call that the family belt. A lot of young families in a similar situation to me, which is fighting every day to stay in the city, to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage, get their kids to school, have good playgrounds, parks, pools. And what I like about urban planning and what I like about politics is whether or not you follow either. You as a Torontonian have a view on transit, and congestion and bike lanes and parks and pools and hockey rinks and garbage bins and the basic city services that make up and touch our day-to-day lives. You might not realize we're talking urban planning or politics, but you probably have things that you really like maybe the Green Pea app, kind of the only like digital forward thing that the city's done that works, or frustrations and pain points, and you got views on that. So you can always talk to people about it.
Right. So then as you go forward from where you are now, what are some of the ambitions that you have to go forward?
Well, it's been cool because running for council because you wanted to fix things, running for council because you wanted to create impact, it's been a great forum for that. And there's really no limitation on what you can do if you have the determination and the courage and the resilience to keep pushing. And it does sometimes feel like it's a boulder up a hill. And I think the city of Toronto, which employs 50,000 people, we're the largest employer in the city of Toronto, is the city of Toronto. I would suggest that's actually not really a positive thing, but it's a big.
I want to say that again, just in case you didn't really hear it.
Yeah.
So the city of Toronto employs 50,000 people
or more, and it's the largest employer in Toronto.
So just everyone think about that for a second, Kay.
And why that's worth noting is I don't necessarily think having the biggest bureaucracy is us winning. I don't necessarily think that is the way where we're going to unlock our potential or our prosperity.
Right.
We can come to that. But what I wanted to point out is I took my experience and my skills as an urban planner, as a city builder, and I got to work on those pain points and frustration.
Yeah.
Working to expedite the process. And we still have a lot of work to do on that, but working to expedite the process, getting down into the weeds to resolve some of the issues around, even development charges as it related to accessory dwelling units, ending exclusionary zoning in our neighborhoods, coming forward with a pathway for multiplex and the gentle density that we're seeing now, coming up with the major streets program where, you're able to do 6 stories as of right on a bunch of streets that certainly warrant and can support the density, but before we're not able to. Addressing the angular plane issues that really became the Toronto vernacular architecturally and is the most expensive and cost prohibitive and difficult way to engineer and design a building. And again, in an affordability crisis, all those things add up. It's not death by 1,000 cuts. Projects die here because it's death by 1,000 additions. So
what about things like setbacks?
Yeah, same thing. So, we've reformed our mid-rise design guidelines into something that is much more achievable when it comes to building. You go back to 2015 and we called ourselves the mid-rise city. We had this vision to be like Washington, D.C. or Paris, and, everything was going to be mid-rise. In a city that had more development than anywhere else on the continent, single-digit percentage of that was on our avenues. Yeah. Single-digit percentage of that was mid-rise, and it's because it was the most cost inefficient, expensive, time-consuming, and difficult thing to build. So when people lament Toronto's development patterns, where we have, neighborhoods that are characterized by single detached houses and the other alternative, which is 60-story towers, it's because it was as cumbersome and time-consuming to build the 60-story tower as a 6-story building. So obviously people built the 60-story tower, and nobody was asking the questions, why? Why does everyone choose to do a 60-story building instead of the mid-rise that we say that we want to see?
Right.
So we made it financially impossible to do it and very difficult, time consuming, requiring a million different variances to get something that was buildable. So the takeaway is, I'm on the policy side as a politician, so I can roll up my sleeves and go and address and fix those technical problems that talking to it, the sort of general electorate, you're going to lose them. But in terms of actually outcomes that I think will serve the city well in the long term, these are big moves that I was able to do when I was the chair of planning and housing, and stuff that when the market turns around, I think will really reshape Toronto in a way that's more accessible, more affordable, and more desirable for a lot of people.
Okay, so given all the things you've just said, so what does it look like as you now have seen some of this change? What else do you feel really has to change and now you have a platform to be able to help make that change. So what does it look like?
You know what? When I reflect on the things we've been able to do, it shows me change is possible. If you work hard at it and you find your focus and you build coalitions of support and capacity, we can fix the things that aren't working. And if you can fix things, if you can make things better, it gives us reason to have hope. And I'm hopeful. I'm bullish as hell on Toronto. I'm all in on the city. And, that's not any different than you and your family and folks that are listening to the podcast right now. We want Toronto to be a great city. In 2023, there was a municipal by-election for mayor. I jumped in on that along with 102 of my friends and a dog that was on the ballot. I was not successful in that. And we have a new administration.
Yeah.
But when you run and you lose, you actually learn a lot. One of the other things that happened was the birth of my second daughter. And so while I was really focused on all the planning stuff, and we were talking about that and technical changes, it's given me opportunity to reflect on why you do it and why it matters. And I want Toronto to be the best city in the world, full stop. And sometimes I say that to people and they kind of snicker, they laugh, and it's like, oh, are we a world-class city? How do we compare to, Paris or New York or Tokyo? Like that should be the goal though, right?
Well, but as you say that, I mean, I want to provide some basic context to this, because I also strongly believe that this city is it is a world-class city that is missing the mark in many ways.
Right.
But we have Broadway shows. We used to have an amazing entertainment district that now no longer exists because people don't go out anymore like that. But
right.
We have world-class restaurants, and we have
the best hospital in the world, UHN. We've got fantastic universities and colleges.
Right.
We have great sports teams, even the Leafs, still love them.
Yeah. They may let you down every now and again.
Yeah, sure.
We just
but that's part of being a Leafs fan.
Run.
Yeah. So there's so much good here in the city.
Tech. Sorry, I'm cutting you off.
Yeah.
But Waterloo, you've got Waterloo that's not far away, and there's a tech hub here in Toronto. You've got all the major banks. There's so much here, but we're missing something.
Well, it's what we have is our people.
Yeah.
That is the best thing about Toronto. Toronto works because Torontonians make it work. The problem is there's too much friction at City Hall. Too often you're trying to do the basic thing. It could even be getting a permit for your deck, and you're fighting City Hall. It would be a small mom and pop on a main street trying to get a business license. You spend more time fighting City Hall to get a business license than you do working with your supply chain or marketing or hiring staff to deliver the services. We got to reduce the friction. And in our aspirations to make Toronto one of the best cities in the world, we got to focus that on some of the core components. I want this city to be the best city in the world to raise a family. I want it to be the best city in the world to build a business. And I think if we can get back to some of the basics, then we can allow people to unlock their potential here in the city, which is really what the dream is for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go and chase down that opportunity and realize the potential that exists inside of each and every one of us.
Yeah. Well, and if you're a young professional and you're finishing university, you want to think to yourself that you've got the ability to potentially move into a place that you can afford to live in.
Of course.
And how do you do that? Because right now you can't.
So you need to see a pathway to having a roof over your head. You need to see a pathway to, be able to put together a down payment and, move from renting into home ownership. I still think a lot of people want to build some equity. And, renting's a great option. We're building more rentals. And when I first moved here out of grad school, I was at Yonge and St. Clair in an old 1970s apartment building. No AC, parquet floor. It was awesome. It was a big unit, galley kitchen, big unit because it was an old building.
Yeah.
But I was on the 4th floor, took the stairs up every day. It was nice and fit. And in the summertime, I just sat in front of a fan wherever I was in the apartment because it was awesome, man. But so.
And it also was it was affordable.
It was
relatively.
Oh my goodness. It was so affordable.
Yeah.
And it had a parking space for my Honda Fit. It was good. So look, I think people still want that, but they feel like we're kind of coming out of what I would characterize as a decade of decline, a decade of drift. And when I talk about the 23 election, we have an administration now that I think has a different set of priorities that maybe don't necessarily reflect the priorities of everyday Torontonians that I'm hearing from. Because when I talk to, families out in Etobicoke or New Canadians out in Scarborough, they might be 50 kilometers apart across the city, but they're saying the same thing. And that they want the city to be safe. They want it to be a safe city for their family. They want it to be affordable, and they want it to be a city that they can get around. And right now, Toronto has never felt less safe. It's never been less affordable, and it's never been more difficult to navigate. So those are the type of basics and focus that we need to find at City Hall. And, I would characterize it this way. In the wintertime, when the snow's flying, we got to be able to clean it up. In the summertime, when we have a heat wave, we need to make sure the pools are open. We need to be a city that could cut the lawn and the boulevards and, swimming lessons that are available for everybody, so it doesn't feel like the Hunger Games when you go to register your daughters.
Yeah, you got to have parks that are working for the families.
Parks that are open, safe, and accessible.
Yeah.
And sometimes people get upset when I say this, but if I'm taking my daughters to the park and I'm walking through a campground because we have allowed encampments to proliferate, it's not dignified for the people who are living in a tent and needles and crack pipes on the playground. And it's also not fair to everybody else who's trying to use those parks that are so vital in a city of Toronto where a lot of folks don't have access to a backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is just like clarity of the mission, clarity of our priorities.
Well, and to that point, because I know that there have been some conflict over what you've just said about whether or not people are saying whether or not there are encampments. And the reality is, if there's a policy in place that doesn't allow for it and then it's enforced, then there really is no encampments because now you're actually looking after that.
Yeah. And look, it's like, let's take this from a position of compassion.
Yeah.
And humanity. It's not compassionate or dignified to have people who have a lot of challenges live in rough in our parks. That's not the right response. The right response is to connect them immediately with shelter, put them on the pathway to housing, ensure that they have access to the supports and treatment that they need, and help them move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Letting them live in a park for 7 months on end where there is significant drug trafficking, sex trafficking, where they're pulling hydro off of hydro boxes, where you've got propane tanks blowing up and people dying. Like, that is not a compassionate or dignified thing to do. Mm-hmm. And the other side of that is the park becomes completely unusable for families and folks in the neighborhood that need access to green space. So like, I'm not going to be afraid to do the difficult but necessary things to make sure that we're connecting people with the shelter and the treatment that they need, and also preserving the community assets like our parks that are so vital to living in Toronto. And I think that's what a back to basics agenda is about, making sure the trains run on time, making sure that transit is safe and accessible for people. We can access our parks, and in a winter city, we clean up the snow, and in the summer, the pools are open for kids.
Well, I got to say this, we record this, I live in Leaside, and I know that it's a long time established area. But we have like a Leaside dad's chat that happens. And in the summertime, we back onto Serena Gundy. And it's like one of the greatest trail networks that exist in a major city as it travels from where we are here all the way down to the beaches.
Right.
In the summertime, there is no one out there helping to make sure that the parties that happen in there with loud music, with people making fires in trees that have fallen down, like that, it exists, and there's nothing that happens with enforcement. And moving, in some ways beyond that to then you think about what you talked about before about small infill along the subway line. Like, we need it along Eglinton's about to, hopefully one day in the next decade it's going to open, right?
Yeah.
And
I've heard we're close for a couple of years now.
And so hopefully it opens, and you need more light infill along those areas, the 3-story, the 4-story, the 5-story, and there's got to be revisions to code to be able to make stuff buildable and not crush the developer side, which then changes the cost of affordability for the person that wants to rent it or own it.
Right. And this is the recognition and sobriety we all have to have around housing, is that, not to change lanes here, but nobody makes more money on housing than the government does. And that's a truth. We have to be honest about that. 30% of the cost of a unit of housing in the city of Toronto is taxes, development charges, and fees. And so I find it quite rich, pardon the pun, for governments of all stripes at all levels to go out there and beat their chests about affordability without having the internal reflection to look and consider what cost is government having impacting the lack of affordability. And we have had governments that are too timid and too slow to respond with the changes to address the fees and the costs that we are thrusting upon housing, because ultimately that gets passed through to the consumer. Ultimately, that drives up the cost of housing. And, we've always had to provide social housing for, the sort of bottom 10 percentile of the socioeconomic index. And that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a question of how many hundreds of thousands of dollars of subsidy are going to be applied on a per door basis, and who's going to pay for it. Is it the feds, the province, the city, or your next door neighbor in a market cross subsidy model?
Right.
So that's fine. That's something that we have to do. But the biggest risk for Toronto, for our productivity, our sustainability, our prosperity, is that last year, 70,000 people left the city in a flight for affordability. That's teachers, that's bus drivers, that's nurses. They make too much money to qualify for any sort of subsidy, but they don't make enough money to be able to afford to live here.
Right.
So that, when we talk about missing middle, it's generally the gentle density and multiplex, and
it's affordability.
But it's affordability.
Yeah, of course it is.
It's affordability.
It's one of the key components of it.
So let's have a conversation about how government can make housing more affordable. And I think you have to look at development charges that have gone up 1,200% over the past 15 years. And you think about anything else in our economy that has had an escalator of 1,200% over the past 15 years, I can't think of anything else. And yet we've taken the most important foundational component of anyone's life, which is having a roof over your head, and we've rocketed the bill on that.
Mm-hmm.
And the elected officials who were there at the time and did that, we're all dealing with the consequence of that. So it's going to take bold leadership to go back and rewrite that and fix it, right size it.
So what does that mean for you? What are you
It means for me, I'll be running for mayor in 2026 here in the city of Toronto. I'm going to be running on a back to basics agenda with the goal of making the city safer, more affordable, and easier to get around. And when it comes to affordability and housing, I've announced that I will reduce development charges by 25% using housing accelerator funds, $471 million that was provided by the federal government, that currently is being used by the administration to stand up a new public builder model in the city of Toronto. And this is where I would differ, from Mayor Chow. We both are passionate about housing. We both want to help the city, but I don't think that there's a lot of examples you can point to where the government has gone out and done something and delivered it faster for less money than the private sector. When I look around the city of Toronto, I don't feel like we have a shortage of experienced builders. The experienced builders have the capital and the experience and the talent to go and get the job done. Local government's role needs to be to create the conditions so that those projects are viable and we can get shovels in the ground. So the current approach, public builder, that suggests that the municipality is going to put on the hard toe boots, the hard hat, and go swing a hammer. I don't think building more bureaucracy to build more housing is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to focus on creating the conditions so that projects are viable, so that they are financeable, so we can keep people in the trades employed and get them back to work, delivering the supply that the city needs.
Yeah, and that our kids are going to need.
Yeah.
So I say I wish you all the best in this, but I'm going to say this because I think it's important that the podcast is about it's about architecture, it's about design, it's about the consultants that make it up. And I don't make this a political podcast. I don't specifically. Right. And the reason that I wanted to have you on was to talk about the history of who you are and what you're doing and what you've done to get to where you are. And so if you're listening to this now, I want you to understand this is not a political podcast, but it is important to understand the people that you are going to be looking at as you go forward with making decisions on how our city is going to look. I'm not telling anyone on here who to vote for. I'm simply making you aware of a platform that Brad has so that you're aware of what exists comparatively to what else is out there. You do your own homework, you do your own research, you make your own decisions. I just think that this makes logical sense.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, they want government that's focused on the practical. They want government at all levels that, is really a reflection of where they're at in their lives right now. And I just think about all the families who are fighting like hell to stay here in the city.
Yep.
We want Toronto to be successful. We want our people to be successful. We need to create the conditions here in this town so that they can achieve that success and find their potential within and unleash it. And that's what it's about.
Yeah. And underneath your chair is my tax bill. And right. And I leave it there because I want to sit on top of it.
Yeah. Right. Well,
I want to see what that, I'm still waiting for like what the additional taxes are going to turn into, but nonetheless, I want to say this. I wholeheartedly appreciate you doing this. I know that you've got a really busy agenda, and I appreciate you taking the time to be able to have this conversation on this platform because it means something.
No, it's great. And, you're involved in the city building space and many of your listeners are, and we all have a vested stake in our future. And I think this next election, if you want status quo, you're going to have status quo options. If you want change, I'm going to offer change for you as well. And the future of Toronto is not going backwards. It's about being bold and decisive and trying something new. And, in 328 days from now, I think we're going to have a lot of opportunity in front of us, and I'm really excited about it. So thanks for the opportunity to chat, and it's great to be here with you at the Shed.
Thanks, my pleasure.